The Battle of the Bulge was the largest military fight that the U.S. Army has ever had in its entire history. Over 600,000 troops participated, and in the end, almost 20,000 Americans were killed.
After the horrific attacks on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese on December 7, 1941, the United States declares war and joins the Allied forces in World War II. The U.S. Army begins the liberation of Western Europe during the invasion of Normandy in June 1944. Shortly thereafter, General George S. Patton and other commanders lead their troops across France, Belgium, and the Netherlands.
Patton's Third Army sweeps across France in record time, always seeming to be one step ahead of the Germans. Patton seemed to always know what the Germans were going to do, before the Germans knew what they were going to do.
In early December of 1944, most intelligence officers and generals in the U.S. Army, and even Allied Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, believe that the German army has been beaten and World War II is all but over.
The German army seemingly was defeated. The Western armies had pushed the German army back more or less to the borders of Germany. Hitler, the inveterate gambler, did not want to just sit around and just be squeezed like a nut in a nutcracker. And so he decided, I'm going to roll the dice one more time. I'm going to go on the attack.
On December 16, 1944, Hitler and the German army launched the last-ditch Ardennes counteroffensive that will widely become known as the Battle of the Bulge.
The reason the battle becomes known as the Battle of the Bulge is that the Americans and the British were caught off guards. And as a result, on December the 16th, 1944, when the Germans launched this winter invasion, our lines bulged, where we had a spearhead of German troops that overran our forces on their way ultimately to trying to make it to Antwerp.
Possibly one of the only members of the Allied forces that is not caught off guard by the offensive is the 3rd Army intelligence officer and Patton's G2, Oscar Koch.
On December 9th, so basically a week, 7 days prior to that, Koch had already started to see indicators and warnings that there was something afoot. There were all these panzer divisions unaccounted for. A German panzer division would have several regiments. It would have one panzer regiment and 2 panzer grenadier regiments. Panzer grenadiers are just basically motorized or mechanized infantry. And so he had already briefed Patton, and Pat said, okay, we need to prepare a contingency plan in case we have to turn north.
Based on sound all-source intelligence, Colonel Koch knows that the Germans have an overwhelming force advantage of rested troops and retrofitted tanks, and that the terrain and weather favors an enemy attack.
We always say the commander drives intelligence, and the relationship between General Patton and Oscar Koch really epitomizes that. General Patton was always thirsty for information, and Koch provided that to him. He knew where to look, he knew how to get the information, he knew how to organize his time and his staff to get them working on the right things and pull everything together at the right time to enable General Patton to make crucial decisions.
On December 19th, 3 days after the attack, Patton informs General Eisenhower that he will pull his 3rd Army out of their current offensive position, turn his army 90 degrees, and come to the aid of the 101st Airborne Division, 150 miles to the north in the city of Bastogne.
Turns out Patton was able to do exactly what he said he was going to do, turn his army north 90 degrees in 48 hours, thanks to his intelligence officer, his G2, Colonel Oscar Koch.
Koch had the courage of his convictions, he had the trust of his commander, and the commander, of course, came to realize in a big way at the Battle of the Bulge that trust was well placed. And it saved the Allied offensive. The 3rd Army came in and relieved Bastogne shortly after Christmas in 1944, rescued the 101st Airborne Division, and held that crucial road nexus at Bastogne that would enable the Allies to successfully thwart that German offensive. An incredible accomplishment. 3rd Army's finest hour, Patton's finest hour, and Koch's finest hour.
The German army will never recover to full strength. and will eventually surrender after Hitler's death 4 months later on May 8, 1945.
Colonel Oscar Koch, and the reason why he's such a giant within U.S. Army military intelligence was because a lot of the techniques, tactics, and procedures that we use, he created. And he was a very successful intelligence officer, and so he's definitely considered one of our fathers of military intelligence for good reason. He was an excellent military intelligence officer.